Shalom, and welcome to the Remnant Radio Show, where we're living and learning a restoration lifestyle. And this is another part of the series for the Alef Tav Remedy, which has to connect with Genesis 1:1 with Elohim Alef Tav. And we're going to talk about the Alef Tav body system. And my special guest today is Miss Kimberly Kibitza. Shalom, Kimberly.
Hi, Nitsa. I can't believe we've known each other for as long as we have, and we've never done this together before. This is so exciting for me.
It's very true. All right. So we had, this show is basically going to be about the church has a problem, right?
We do. The entire body of believers has a problem. Well, and let's just extend that. I think humanity has a problem with its own humanity, but the church really struggles in this area.
Yeah. So this one's called Permission to be Human, and I added not perfect. All right. So this is going to be interesting. And one of the things, let's just for a second, before I go into that first question, is introduce yourself. And I could introduce you, but I might get long-winded. Introduce yourself, what you do, etc., right? And how people can contact you so that we can get into the show.
Okay, since this is sort of directed towards the Alef Tav body and Dr. Manzo and his work as well, I'll just say that Dr. Manzo and I have known each other for over 20 years, learning and working alongside each other. We opened up a clinic somewhat at the same time together, Wellbeing by Design, where we look for the root causes of illness and disease, and then build protocols for people to address those things based on a holistic approach, body, soul, and spirit. And one of the key differences, though, because there are a lot of amazing practitioners that are doing something similar, what sets us apart is the understanding of the Hebrew alphabet, the letters, the building blocks of creation, and the parts of our bodies that are related to that level of creation, that we have the Hebrew letters on our body. And if we know about that, it explains so much of what it is that we experience as humans. So I work with the clinic in Ohio, Wellbeing by Design, but then the Lord has called me to relocate, and I'm now talking to you guys from Arizona, the Phoenix Valley, where we are building and creating a new clinic that is serving this side of the nation and amplifying and building on a lot of the things that we have already started there in Ohio. So I have 3 children and spent a lot of time overseas missionary, working with Bible translation ministries. And so that's it in a nutshell.
All right. And so your center there in Arizona is called the Shiloh?
Shiloh. Yeah, we use the Americanized version, Shiloh Holistic Wellness Center. And you can reach me specifically here at theshilohcenter.com.
Okay, and before we get started, I do want you somewhere to plug in here, because we ended the last show kind of talking about the cold wave laser that you offer. And this has to do with light and how it helps with pain and all kinds of different things. So if you could just give me a real short clip. And then you also, really, your specialty is in emotions, right? Counseling. I don't know if you want to call it deliverance, but deliver us from our emotions, right? So don't want to miss that, because a lot of people ask about that.
Yeah, so you did a great interview with Pam, and she's actually one of my clinic partners here in the Valley, and she has experienced the Cure Wave laser, which is a cold laser. It's a little bit of a misnomer because it does get warm, but what makes it so powerful is that where traditional red light therapy, which most people know is so good for the body, that can only go like within 1 centimeter to 2 centimeters under the surface of the skin. Whereas this red laser drives photons 4 to 6 inches into the body, which it's been FDA cleared for tissue repair, inflammation reduction, pain reduction, those types of trauma type injuries. However, because it works with the mitochondria of the cell, which is the powerhouse, right? If we don't have the mitochondria functioning properly, the cells can't do what they're supposed to do. And since almost all of our cells have mitochondria, when we're bringing light into those cells, it's going to create communication, harmony, balance, and energy that the body needs to perform optimally. So whether we're treating tissue that's been damaged, joints, ligaments, muscles, or we're shining it on the liver or the thyroid or the skin, we're going to get some sort of good benefit from that because you're introducing light into the body. And as you well know, we are light. First and foremost, we're light.
Right. And that's all in Genesis 1:1-3. And light is also another definition, can be order. And it was all chaotic, and Father came in and put that order in there. And when you're in ATB, you're going to learn that we use those three modalities of magnetism, light, and sound. And so the enemy can use it against us, and Father's given us those tools to work for us.
Yeah. And then I do a lot of emotional and relational coaching. I am very intentionally not a licensed counselor or therapist. And for the types of clients that I work with, that's often very important for them because I don't want the state or any licensing board to dictate how I sit with a client. So I do emotional and relational coaching, working with early childhood trauma, generational trauma, spiritual strongholds, relationship health, anything that has to do with the soul and the soul's impact on our health. And that does branch into spiritual stuff as well. I kind of cut my teeth with more of the spiritual warfare, deliverance ministry side of things. And what I have come to realize, both Dr. Manzo and I, is that that's when we're working in that area of deliverance, oftentimes we're putting the cart in front of the horse. And so even though it is something that is appropriate for certain times and places and people, oftentimes we're overemphasizing the spiritual and not addressing the soul issues, which actually create the spiritual issues in many ways. But I think that's probably a really good segue into a lot of the topics today.
Absolutely. Okay, so you had made this statement that there's this key statistic right out there that says 70% of the book of Psalms centers around difficult emotions. And so I'll let you take it from there.
That's right. If we take a look at all of the Psalms, over 70% are dealing with grief, fear, shame, anger, and also some anxiety, but we're going to talk about why anxiety doesn't show up as strong within the Psalms. And if we look at even in the Gospels, the book of Matthew, I did a study on how many verses in Matthew address some sort of emotional state. And there were like 300 plus verses in that one gospel that address mental emotional states of people that are experiencing the life of Messiah. And so I think there were there were maybe 5 instances of spiritual deliverance, like demonic interactions. Everything else is addressing the mental and emotional states of people. So we see this mirrored in both the Hebrew Old Testament and the New. So, and it's so important for us to talk about this because within the faith community especially, we have this tendency to think that, okay, like I need to be spiritual. I need to, walk in the spirit and bear fruit and sort of live above my humanity. And somewhere along the way, we absorb this idea that being human is actually a problem. And this goes right to the Garden of Eden when the serpent said to Eve, basically, are you actually enough being a human? Or do you need to be more? Right? And so we unknowingly as believers often walk in this wrong idea about the value of being human, having a body, having a very human experience. That's exactly what the Creator created for us. And yet, when we become saved or we start to walk in our faith more and more, all of a sudden it's like, well, I have to separate myself from this human experience. So that is really the heart of what I work in with clients is to really teach them what it means to be human and why it's such a game changer. So if you want, we can go into sort of just a brief explanation as to why being human and being an image bearer, what that actually means to us today.
Yeah. I just wanted to make a comment in that your daughter, Davian, who also does this type of work, right, who's married to my son, often looks at me and says, it's not a sin to be angry, or it's not a sin to be shamed, or, you know what I mean? Like, so it's like, that's a novel idea, I think, for a lot of people, that if we feel these feelings, then there must be something wrong with us. But the sin is not feeling the feelings, right?
100%. She's so right on. And there are many of us that are sitting there going like, yeah, I know that it's not wrong to feel a feeling, and yet the thoughts don't line up with the core beliefs.
Right.
And absolutely. So we think we are operating like that, but we're not.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So go on.
So when we talk about being human, we can't get away from the simple foundational fact that we as humans are image bearers of the Creator.
Mm-hmm.
We are an imperfect, right? Because we're not walking in perfection any longer. We are an imperfect reflection of His perfection. And so there are certain things that we inherently possess that we often either never think about, or we actually dismiss, or even kind of demonize in a way. So if I start talking about our rights, our human rights, the rights that we have as humans, even a lot of people, I think, that might even catch this broadcast, there's a little twinge of discomfort inside, because we have this idea like, I have no rights in Christ.
Right. Like, absolutely. That's my first trend.
I get it, because I've been there. I know how that feels, and yet it's not scriptural. So if we go back to this fundamental understanding that we are image bearers, that we are, in a sense, ambassadors and little mini creators in our own right, because we're reflecting the image of the Creator, we have 3 very specific rights as humans that if we are not walking in, we will not have the experience in life that we were intended to have. And as a little side note, that we're not gonna have time for this now, but maybe this could be a future talk. Almost every form of trauma that we experience is going to be impacting one of these 3 rights. Okay.
So
the enemy loves to dehumanize us by attacking these rights. So the first one is our right to connection. We're not made to be alone. This idea of, well, it's just me and God, that is so incredibly unbiblical.
It's a song, right?
Right? Like, yeah, especially when we tend to go through seasons of isolation where people aren't maybe as holy as we are, or, and it's just like, I'm going to have to isolate myself because, like, I'm just going to have to rely on God. Well, that is so against the grain for the way that we are created and designed. And the reason that we know that we have this right for connection is because He, the Creator, is in relationship with Himself and in relationship with others, right? And so we cannot be fully in our human God-bearing role if we do not have connection with other people, be in relationship.
Okay.
The second one then is belonging. We have the right to belonging. And that is the deep need that we have to be known and accepted. It's not weakness, it's how God made us. And how we know that we have this deep need and right to belong is that He desires to be known and accepted. That's why He created humanity, right? Because there was a desire for us to know Him and be together with Him and to accept Him. And so if we don't have a sense of either belonging, to be known and accepted by within ourselves, It's going to be really hard for us to know and accept others, which is why we have this theme throughout both the Old and the New Testament about the ability and the capacity that we have to love others is like tied to the ability that we have to love ourselves.
Right. Okay.
And not loving ourselves is an epidemic. And again, for the religious mindset out there, loving ourselves is like, ooh, no, we're not supposed to do that, right? So belonging. And then the third one is purpose. We were each uniquely created and formed with something to contribute to creation. So when that goes unfulfilled, it drastically impacts our body, soul, and spirit. And again, how do we know this? It's because Yah has purpose, right? The first thing that we have evidence of in scripture is him doing something, creating.
I think your screen might have, but we can still hear you, Kim. Well, there you go.
Yeah, I'm sure that was a really lovely, awkward pose there.
Actually, I think it was fine. So you were talking about contributing to creation, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what? Automatically in my head, I actually think about empty nesters. You know, sometimes it's like, well, what is my purpose anymore? You know, what am I living for? You know, or at least what is it that's motivating me to continue to go on versus, you know, go be with the Lord kind of thing. You know, because now you have to redefine, you know, now that you know your purpose is more than just taking care of your children or whatever, but that whole idea of, you know, what do we do with our time now? I mean, even if we join each other's company, that's not as exciting to us as it is our children or our grandchildren. Do you know what I mean?
And you can even talk about people who retire either from work or from ministry, right? Mm-hmm. And there's this void of feeling like you have purpose and meaning. Mm-hmm.
Right. And of course, there's, you know, many young people and children and young adults really need purpose. You know, they're searching for that, right? But before you go back with that, I kind of wanted to go back to number one, which was connection, with number two, which is belonging, to be known and accepted. But I think, you know, a lot of people, I find those two really close together. Like if you don't connect with yourself, which is probably part of the big problem, right? Really connect with your feelings and yourself, then how do you really separate those two? Mm-hmm. To be belonging and known? I guess maybe we don't connect with ourselves. So because we don't think subconsciously or whatever that we are acceptable. Does that, you know, seems like a loop to me.
It is kind of a loop. And to muddy the waters even a little bit more, you can't have purpose without connection and belonging either.
Gotcha.
Right? Because how can you contribute to creation if you're not a part of it and you don't belong to it?
Okay.
So in a way, it's kind of like the body, soul, spirit idea, where does one begin and the other end?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, they're all interrelated and interdependent on themselves.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's a good observation.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. So did you want to get into those emotions?
Yeah. So now that we've laid this foundation of connection, belonging, and purpose as being foundational for understanding what it means to be human, the next logical step is then to talk a little bit more about our emotional lives and how those also are part of the original design. And for so many people, emotions are actually like an enemy of faith, right? It's contrary to the spirit. And yet emotions play such a huge role in the way that we were designed to function. Emotions are information, and we have to really work at not assigning some sort of morality to an emotion, because it's just giving us information about something that we're experiencing.
I thought emotions, especially like anger, is a sin.
Right. Yeah. or
Not
disgust
disengaged,
or
right?
irritated. It's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly what we think. And for the person out there then too will be like, well, the Bible does says be angry, but don't sin.
Right.
You know, it's easy to quote that verse, but we're dealing with centuries of cultural programming. And so, which is why I started out at the beginning talking about the disconnect between what we know intellectually and what we believe in the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so, don't sit there and think, oh no, I got this all worked out because I know these things. It's
Right.
a whole different ball game to walk in the belief and the practice of these things. And so if we look at emotions, when we suppress or over spiritualize them, it doesn't make them go away. It just drives them like deeper underground, where they end up showing up in physical manifestations, right? Illness, disease, pain, they show up in our relationships,
Mm-hmm.
right? The patterns, like, man, why do me and my husband keep arguing about the same thing all the time, right?
Right.
But also, they also affect us spiritually, because when we're walking, when we're prioritizing spirit over all the other parts of our humanity, we're also out of balance. And I guess we could probably do another show about Gnosticism and the idea that the body is bad and that the physical world is corrupt and not good. So I'll just kind of leave that on the table for another time. But if we go back to the Alef Tav body system, those of you who have studied it know that there are five primary emotions that we cover within Alef Tav body. And so I'd love to spend kind of the rest of the time talking about those five in particular and how we can feel those in a way that honor our humanity instead of suppressing them, trying to get away from them, or even feeling them in a way that causes us to do damage to ourselves or the relationships around us.
All right. And for those, in prior shows, I'll talk more about them actually, because you can go on and on about we're basically shaped like a menorah. We have 7 centers, right, of energy and light that come from the source. But in the Alef Tav cycle chart, which I use and try to show everybody all the time how to address that, you'll see those colors. First cycle is yellow and anxiety, and second is grief and orange, and etc. So if you have those charts, or if you want, contact me, because they're all associated with the different organs. Yes, absolutely. And this, it's just a really phenomenal tool. So, and I think, I'm sure you're going to address this, but I was kind of thinking, years ago when I first, got into touch with emotions, in the sense that it's like Father kept speaking to me, I care about your soul too, right? It's not just, because how many of us get spirit filled or whatever, have this experience with the Lord, and then we think if you just say that prayer and you just have this experience, then, you're all straightened out, right? And it's like, no, I care about your soul. You are a soul with emotions, right? And He cares about that. And the church just really nails that to the cross, right? And then the other thing, we actually learned this through someone who was astral projecting to the congregation ladies. And it was like I discovered and learned through that process that just because you have a thought, right? Like, where is this thought coming from? Of course, I didn't even know about astral projection, but it's like, it turns out, he was doing this to many ladies in the congregation. And it was like that whole thing of Father just showing me, just because you saw this or heard this or felt this, that's not a sin. Right. So that's really hard, so anyway, just want to, so
it is really hard. And maybe before we go into the 5 specific emotions, I think the viewers would really benefit from even just having a really brief conversation about what is an emotion to begin with.
Okay. Yeah.
Because the majority of people that I sit with and I say, so how would you define emotion? they get this like deer in the headlights look, and I mean, I feel bad putting them on the spot. It's not meant to,
Right.
like, oh, you're wrong, right? But I really, don't talk with a lot of people who have thought about this enough to even be able to articulate what an emotion is. And so the word emotion, it's really kind of cool the way that it's been put together, right? Because you have motion, energy in motion. And that is such a great description. I think that goes back to the Latin, energy in motion. So emotion is supposed to be something that moves, right? It moves through us. It causes us to move. If we have an emotion of love, right, that will cause us to move to do something, right? An emotion of anger will cause us to move to do something else. And so I picture it like a wave where it comes up and then it peaks and it's supposed to come down and move through us. But when we don't allow for this pattern and we have this emotion or this feeling kind of come up and it gets stuck because now we're suppressing it, we're uncomfortable with it, we don't understand it, it just kind of like, whoop, and it doesn't have anywhere to go. And so if we thinking about emotions as a frequency of energy that moves, it carries information, right? So it's on that informational level of creation.
Which in reality, if you're a Quest practitioner or a bioscan practitioner, those are actually measured and show up in the scans. And people think it's woo-woo, but it's like, yeah, there's actual energy that's registered through your DNA. That's like an antenna that sends and receives information. So wanted to really say it's scientific, not just,
It is so scientific. And at the same time, not only is an emotion this energetic wave, right, of frequency, energetic signatures, but when we experience the information when we experience that, we are also having a biological response. And so emotions are also physiological, which means that as that wave comes, it's going to trigger a release in the brain or the gut of a specific kind of hormone or chemical that is then going to create a physiological, which
goes back to why we talk about that for our organs and our physical body, right?
Yes, exactly. And it's also the reason why the physical manifestation of emotion, right? The chemical that it produces in the body that causes a biological sensation is the reason why we tend to suppress, avoid, and get away from it, because it feels so uncomfortable. It's actually painful in the body. And this is why when adults who are fully, executive function, they understand all of these things, and yet when they're in a situation that's producing very, very deep emotional responses in the body, they call 911 thinking that they're dying, and then they get to the emergency room and they go, oh, it was a panic attack. Right. And so it can make the body feel like it's dying to have certain forms of these emotions come through us. So as we're talking about emotions, we have to remember these two distinct ways that we interact with them, energetically and biologically. They have to stay together. Otherwise, we're missing a lot of information if we can't wrap our heads around that. So then going back to the 5 primary emotions within the Alef Tav body system, there is a great architectural design of emotions. And if we think about the way that we were created, and this also goes, I'll drop another little nugget out there that I have to give props to Dr. Manzo for this one, because this is not my original idea, but it has to do with the color wheel, which colors are actually primary and secondary, right? And so, but if we think of this concept of primary and secondary with colors, we can kind of think a little bit too about how this can translate into the emotional experience.
Okay.
So, because we're going to discuss 3 of the primary emotions.
Okay.
And the first one, and this is not in the order of the cycles that we're going to move through. This is just sort of, for me, order of what I think is the right thing to discuss first. So the first emotion that we're going to talk about is shame. That's one of my favorite things to talk about, Nitsa.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing.
Yeah, nobody enjoys this topic except, Brene Brown, she enjoys it. There's a couple other people that I think really enjoy talking about shame. But the reason why I like to talk about it so much, and the reason why I chose to discuss it as the first primary emotion, is because of how much it influences our human experience in all three of our human rights: connection, belonging, and purpose are all going to be attacked through the way that we experience shame. Okay. It's the most isolating of all emotions because it's not about I did something wrong. It's the bad feeling that I feel because I did something wrong. We often mistake it for guilt. Guilt is feeling bad, right? Because we did something that we shouldn't have done, or we did something that hurt somebody. Whereas shame is the bad feeling that we have because we are wrong. We're defective. We're damaged. We're not worthy of being known. There's something intrinsically defective about us. That's very different than
whether it's true or not, right? I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be true to feel it.
No.
It could be a truth or untruth that you are unworthy or defective. Do you know what I mean? It's like people think of themselves as not necessarily true whatsoever.
Yeah. And it goes, again, this is an emotion that all three of the primary emotions come right out of the garden experience with Adam and Eve and when they ate of the fruit. So we can discuss that another time, but that is the reason why they're primary, in my opinion, is because it changed Adam and Eve's DNA. And with them being our first parents, we feel these more intensely because they have actually marked our genetic code. And so, shame is a tough one because I didn't even think I had shame. Like, I'm pretty confident, right? Like, I have a pretty good view about myself. And yet when I really started digging in to shame and then listening to Brene Brown's Men, Women, and Worthiness, it was like, oh my gosh, I am shame. I have high shame, because the way that it shows up in me is so much different than the way that it shows up with somebody else. And it doesn't show up the same way in everybody. My expression of shame is perfectionism and to be in control, right? I always have to fix everything. And if we think though about some of the religious ideas that seem to make shame a righteous feeling, is that, is that whole Christian idea of, I call it wormism.
Okay. The worm. Okay.
Yeah. And this goes back to the Puritans, some of the Calvinist teaching. For many, many, many generations, we have been told that we are worms, like we're sinners, we're awful, we, don't deserve God's love and redemption, like we are just miserable, and, and which leads to that tendency to go, well, then, yeah, so I need to be ultra super spiritual.
Okay.
And so I kind of want to hover over this for a second, because if we look at the verses in scripture about worms, because there are verses out there that equate humans with worms.
Right.
This is a big kicker. Worm in Hebrew does not mean worthless, bad, or defective. It doesn't mean unworthy. It just means worm. And if we look at it in context, what it's really expressing is humility, suffering, and dependence on God. the way that we can be really assured that worm doesn't mean worthless or unworthy is because in Psalm 22, which is a messianic prophecy, who is described as the worm? Yeshua.
Mm.
He was not worthless at all. He was not, defective in any way, shape, or form. And yet he himself had that experience of being a worm because he was going through suffering. The wormism really is about who we are in relationship to the Creator. We're small, right? We're weak. It doesn't have anything to do with our value or the fact that we struggle with making wrong choices and sinning and needing a savior. These are two completely different things. And yet they've become such a part of our Christian fabric that if we even recognize that we feel shame, we associate it with being, well, yeah, you know what? I should feel like that because I am undeserving.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so there's a little bit of mystery around that, but can you see how it's it can create a real problem for us internally?
Oh, yeah. Well, I was thinking, actually a worm is in the soil, a man is from the soil, and worms have a purpose, right? They aerate soil. They're really good for the soil. They're good for fishing, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, and especially when Yeshua, because he has a purpose and he prepares the heart. And so, yeah, again, it goes back to that different logic that comes with the Hebrew block logic in mind. That's amazing.
Yeah, and so our natural response to shame is to isolate, to withdraw, right? To not show ourselves. Shame is about being afraid of people seeing you for who you really are, because you're worried that you won't belong and they will not accept you. They're going to reject you if they really see who you are.
Right.
Whereas the right way to feel shame is, first of all, to feel it and be honest about it. Like I have certain friends, and you guys know who you are, that I can call and be like, I'm in so much shame right now. Can you remind me that I'm not an awful person because I just did something that I feel awful about, right? And so to be honest and say, oh, I'm sitting with some shame right now is the first step. But then the second step is to take that to the Lord, and we can address this with him too and be like, you know what, I'm feeling like a failure. I know I'm not. Can you remind me that you love me even when I'm not living up to the standards that I might have for myself? And another interesting characteristic about emotions in Hebrew, which goes along with the physical sensations that we have, is that all of these words in Hebrew also carry an action, right? And so the word for shame, busha, is the physical sensation of flushing. It's flushing with exposure. It's being like, oh no, they're seeing me, right? And so we have that redness that comes to the face as a biological response to shame.
Which, by the way, on the chart is the color red and the frequency red, etc. So go back to your chart, right?
Exactly. And so this is going to be relevant as we move forward in our discussion today, because if we're not able to feel the emotion in our body, and you think, well, I'm not feeling it, like I don't have that emotion because I don't feel it in my body. The body is feeling it, but you are probably just so dissociated from your body, so disconnected from what's going on in here, that there's all this stuff happening that you're like, nah, not gonna pay any attention to that stuff, right? Which then ultimately ends up manifesting as, chronic illness, autoimmune, that kind of thing. So then if we move on then, because we have like a ton of stuff to cover.
Yeah, we have like 15 minutes. So unless you're going to come back and expand with us and continue, that would be awesome. But yeah, we got 15 minutes here.
Yeah, I would love to do that. But let me just wrap it up with a little bow, and then we can come back and discuss these things a little bit more deeply. The next primary emotion is going to be sadness and grief.
Mm.
And we can look at that, at sadness and grief, through the lens of attachment pain. So grief is like love that doesn't have anywhere to go, right?
Yeah.
Attachment pain is a wound of disconnection. It's unmet love, right? It's a loss of belonging, relationship betrayal. We think of attachment pain and sadness and grief as a rupture in relationship or a failure in relationship. It could be, mom gave me up for adoption, and so we never got to, not only was that a relationship rupture, but then it was also a continued connection that never got to develop the way that it should have.
Mm-hmm.
So sadness and grief is almost always going to be accompanied by this attachment pain. And if we have a tendency to rush past grief, right? In scripture, they would even pay people to come and sing songs while somebody was mourning, right? It was feeling grief. It was almost like celebrated in a way. It was very demonstrative. And I remember, being in Brazil, the funerals there are much more demonstrative. People laughing and crying in the same room, and it's loud. And, and then we would come back to the States and go to a funeral, and it was like, everybody's whispering like this because you don't want to upset anybody. And, and then if you tell a funny story, it's like you feel guilty for laughing because the person over there is still crying. And so we suppress anger and grief so much, sadness and grief. So then if we push forward then a little bit and talk about fear, this is another one that we really don't do well because of all of the scriptures that say fear not.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I have so many people that are like, I had to repent of that fear. I had to take the spirit of fear and, cast that out, right? And this is a complete misunderstanding about what fear is and the role that it has for us. Fear is something that it's so important. It's information, right? So if somebody bursts through the door right here, I'm going to feel fear. Why? Because that is my body giving me information, danger. It's not wrong to feel danger. It's not wrong to feel threatened, right? Courage, which is one of the highest character values in scripture, is not possible without feeling fear.
Okay.
So and I think my video froze, but that's okay.
That's okay. Keep talking.
Yeah. So where fear becomes a problem is when it's not just a momentary emotion that's giving us information about something we need to do or change. It's a state that we live in. And it becomes powerlessness. So fear says something bad might happen, right? But powerlessness says something bad is happening and I can't stop it.
Mm.
And when we walk in that attitude of being powerlessness in the face of fear, that's what the Bible says, don't do that, because it keeps us stuck, right? And it also doesn't allow us to recognize that ultimately, God is the one that's going to act, for us. It's a mistrust in God's ability to act for us when we get stuck in powerlessness.
Right, because to not trust him really, everything we do about obedience or relationship with him really goes back down to trust, T-R-U-S-T, which I still think should be a 4-letter word, but it's the hardest commandment, right?
Yeah.
How are we not going to dig ourselves out of this, right?
Right. Exactly. And so those are the 3 primary. The 2 secondary, are going to be anger and frustration, and then worry and anxiety.
Okay.
Anger and frustration are secondary because and anxiety. So we have anger, frustration, worry, anxiety. The reason why they're secondary is because they are protecting the wound that the primary emotions have caused.
Okay.
It is so much easier for the body to experience anger and anxiety than it is to experience fear, powerlessness, grief, sadness, and shame.
Okay.
And so both anxiety and anger are wonderful tools that we have been given to be able to move, because anger and anxiety both move us, right? That emotion, they move us to action. And if we think about this in a real life situation where, let's say that person comes bursting through my door, right? I can stay, I get, like, oh my gosh, fear, danger, right? Even if I slip into powerlessness, like, oh no, I can't do anything about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anger is that thing that comes behind and takes you from this to, rawr. It's what moves us into action.
Okay.
Anxiety does the same thing, but anxiety is more of an internal state. Okay. Whereas anger is that energy moving outside. Anxiety is that energy on the inside. And anxiety is a wonderful tool to motivate us internally towards something, right? Like, for example, getting on the show today, I felt there was anxiety, right? There's a little anxiousness. Oh gosh, I'm going live. What if something happens, And so, but that little twinge of anxiousness, wrong. It was just my body going, okay, you're about to do something that could be a little scary. You don't know what's gonna, you could be in shame. You might not know how it's gonna turn out.
Right.
And like, let's internally prepare for those things before we get into that situation. So whether we're dealing with the 3 primaries or the 2 secondary emotions, the big takeaway is that they are all God-given, useful information, and that we can learn to experience them without acting out of them in a way that would be harmful to ourselves and the people around us. And
which would be basically sin not. Be angry, but sin.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And, when we think about, like, take anxiety, for example, we have, scriptures, that say, be anxious, for nothing, right? Which it's not, and this is where it's so important to understand this, because we can easily take verses out of context. So that whole be anxious for nothing, it's not a command to stop feeling anxiety or to stop feeling anxious. It's an instruction about what to do in it so you don't get stuck in that state.
Okay, repeat that.
Mm-hmm. It's not a command to stop feeling the emotion, because we've already established there are no emotions that are wrong to feel. It's an instruction about what to do with that feeling so you don't get stuck in it, right? Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, right? But in your anxiousness is how we can interpret that, right? Be anxious for nothing, but when you are anxious, take it to the Lord in prayer.
Okay.
Right. And so I have a lot of people that come to me for either anger issues or or anxiety. I want to get off my anxiety medication. I want to stop being so angry with my kids. Right. And when I'm working with somebody, we almost never discuss anger or anxiety, because those are just the tools that we have developed from our family of origin, from our culture, and from our own personal experience in growing up. Those are the tools that we use to get away from the shame, the attachment pain, and the fear or powerlessness. And so if we can learn how to feel these in a healthy way and experience them, then we don't need to trigger the shame and anger nearly as often. And when we do go into shame and anger, it's with a purpose.
Okay.
So when we, being fully human is about walking in a way in which the soul, the body, and the spirit are not in conflict. They don't have to be in conflict. And the more honest we are about our need for connection, our emotional lives, our triggers, our wounds, the more honest we are about those things, we create a bigger space for the Creator to meet us in those areas. And they become less harmful to ourselves and the people that we're trying to live around in the way that we're trying to experience the world around us.
So you want to keep the, one may be out of sync or whatever, but you're trying to bring it all back into balance, basically.
Yes.
And so I think a lot of what you're saying too, is like, but there are tools for us to know or understand, but I think most of us, especially within a believer community, have, unless it's exampled, and then you just naturally seem to mirror it, right? It's how do you learn to take that and make it a positive response that's going to bring health and balance versus just blowing your top, right? Or getting so worried or anxious just that you're having a panic attack, right?
Right. Yeah. And that is why it's so important for us to be living in community with like-minded people who are also wanting to live like this. It is hard to live being vulnerable, being authentic, staying with a heart of love for each other and ourselves, because that's not our natural tendency, especially in our particular society. And so, finding, reach out to me, because I'm always trying to get people together who are kind of doing this, right? But learning how to do it with yourself is key. And what I've noticed time and time and time again is that the more I'm able to figure this stuff out, the more it gives permission to the people around me to also start to explore that as well. And, we don't always get it right. Even in my relationships, with my kids, coworkers, there are a lot of people that I'm in a relationship with, and I don't always get it right, but at least I've surrounded myself with people who understand that we can have a human experience and we can express emotions, sometimes not in the most healthy way, and yet we're still safe to be around.
Yeah, I think, it seems like it's getting more noticeable that, can you be around people who, we see each other's flaws, we might make each other angry or frustrated, right? But we still have an acceptance towards one another and can bring up or learn the maturity to have that discussion, right? To help bring those things into balance. Whereas I think the majority of the world out there, they don't do any of that. If you do something or you're some way that I can't stand, then, you don't have value. And then I esteem myself and end up in pride or whatever. So I think that's really important. And I've always said, I'd much rather, to me, a true friend is someone who comes up and says, hey, you're a jerk, or you do something that really upsets me. And I want you to know that, because I would never, intentionally do that. And if I did, I'd like to get credit for it. But, and so many people, majority of us, we don't tell each other that I was hurt or offended. And I think if we spent more time communicating, we find out that we even misunderstood and it was nowhere near what was on that other person's mind. On the other hand, sometimes we learn that, it was, those people really are writing that way all the time. And that's an eye opener, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's never happened to me, so I wouldn't know about that. Yeah, no. And actually that's exactly what Yeshua was instructing us when he said, if you discover that somebody has an offense, leave your stuff there and go fix, leave the offering and go fix that, because that relationship is actually more important than the sacrifice you're bringing to the altar.
Yeah.
And so we have this biblical command to do that, but we don't know how. We don't know how to communicate it. Oftentimes we don't know ourselves well enough to even know what we're feeling and why, to be able to communicate that. And that's where the pathways comes in so handy, which is the coaching that we do through the clinic, both here in Arizona and there's another resource too, which is fernandaudrey.org. A lot of the things that we implement within both clinics come partially from the mentoring that we've done through fernandaudrey.org. So I also direct people there as well.
Okay. Yeah. And you could share that with me, exactly how that link is. And so again, tell us who and how to get a hold of you, basically.
Yeah. So the best way to get a hold of me is either through the clinic in Ohio, which would be email Kimberly@well-beingbydesign.com, or you can reach out to me through the clinic here in Arizona, which is wellness@theshilohcenter.com.
Okay. And we'll post those links when we post them to the Rumble channel. So
I do have a phone number too.
Okay,
that is new phone number 928-800-8153.
Now, is that the clinic there?
That's the one here. Yep. Here in the valley.
928-800-8153.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so very much. We'll have to have you back.
I'd love it.
Or, do your own show. No. I mean, you can spend hours and hours on this, right?
Oh, I could. This is this is bread and butter for me.
So much to learn and in it all. So thank you very much. I hope to see you in the next couple of weeks.
Yes, I hope to be back there soon. And I just want to say shalom to everybody. Enjoy being human. You only get one shot at it.
All right. Thank you very much. Blessings. And we will go to our outro.
If you missed today's show or want to watch it again or want to tell someone where they can watch this episode, go to lambnetwork.tv, where you will find this show and all other live Lamb Show archives in the on-demand section of the website. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to tell somebody about the Messianic Lamb Network.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.